out. With that, I yield back.
Yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your service. We honor the Gold Star families and the service members here today. General Milley, General McKenzie, was the ROE, were the rules of engagement at the time of the Abbey Gate incident sufficient for service members like Tyler Vargas to protect themselves?
So it's my judgment they were, and we went in with what we call the standard Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff ROE with supplements for Afghanistan. There's three main components to it. First of all, the inherent right of self-defense. A U.S. service member anywhere in the world at any time has the right to defend him or herself against a threat. It does not have to be an action that you're defending against. It can be intent interpreted. So we're operating under that threat, under that ROE. At the same time, we had extended what we call collective self-defense to our friends, partners, and allies that are there. So you could take actions to defend the Brits. You could take actions to defend your Afghan partners. The third component of that was we used what we call direct action authorities, which allowed you to strike people that were not in direct contact with you, particularly in relationship to Kabul if they posed a self-defense threat. So the last point I would say is we exercised self-defense with lethal effect 3 times during the defense of Kabul on 16, 20, and I believe 22 and 26 August.
Okay, so sticking with the Abbey Gate incident, General McKenzie, you said there was no specific attacker intelligence or no specific intelligence existed and that there was nobody on the bolo that fit that description. Does that remain true today?
It does.
So were you aware, after the Abbey Gate attack, were you aware that service members at the gate had requested the ability to service the target, so to speak? Were you aware of that?
No, I would not be aware of that.
And it's understandable that a combatant commander might not be aware of what service members right on the line are aware of. But post that circumstance, were you concerned about the intelligence you were getting regarding the action you were about to take on the would-be attackers and that network?
Sure. So on or about the 26th, we were tracking 4 broad, very active, very concerning threat streams. We were looking at the threat of a vehicle-borne IED, a person-borne IED, which actually was the modality of the Abbey Gate attack.
Right.
We were looking at indirect fire, rockets and mortars, and we were looking at an insider attack, someone who gets in and blows himself up in the terminal.
Right.
So we had dozens of,
But you had nothing fitting the description of what your service members on the gate, on the line,
had a lot of descriptions of men and
So when the service member on the line is looking at the attacker based on the description and he's got the rules of engagement, but the rules of engagement at that point require him to check with his commander, go up the line, and he does not get approval. That's exceptionally concerning. I understand the fog of war. I get the circumstance you're in, but there's a man sitting here that's been blown up because he couldn't get the answer that he needed. So on Thursday, August 26th, the Abbey Gate attack happens. 3 days later, on August 29th, the drone strike occurs. Now, you said that we had up to 6 Reapers following this car around for 8 hours, and that I think up to 60 pieces of intelligence that proved that these were the people that had just attacked the Abbey Gate.
No, sir, that's not correct.
Well, that's what I've got here for open source reporting. Okay, maybe some of that's not correct, but regardless of the fact, on the 29th, the drone strike occurs, kills 10, 7 of them children. 5 days later, the Pentagon admits there was a mistake. 5 days later. General Milley, when did you know that the drone strike was a failure?
When did I know that the
drone strike was a mistake? On the civilian taking water to his family was a failure?
No, I remember. When did I know it?
It was 5 days before the Pentagon said it was a mistake. When did you know?
Probably day 4, day 5, in that range. I didn't know it right away, if that's what your question is.
And who did you tell when you knew?
Well, I think it came up through me to the Secretary of Defense.
I don't again, from you to the SecDef?
Well, it would have come from General McKenzie would have called me. I don't remember these specifics, but General McKenzie would have called me and said, we have an incident that.
Does anybody else in the Biden administration know at that point that it's a failure?
I honestly don't know.
Because the whole time they're telling us secondary explosions, we got the target, lying to the American people, not having a clue. Who did you tell?
I tell the Secretary of Defense, and of course, if we have a principals meeting, we go through the details of the strike. But I guess I'm trying to. If you're saying, did I tell the President of the United States or whomever, other than the Secretary of Defense, that there was a mistake? I think, and I'm doing this from memory, I think Frank McKenzie, General McKenzie, would have called me, and I would have informed the Secretary of Defense, or he would have called the Secretary of Defense, which is his chain of command, and I might have been in there at the time. I don't recall the actual date time group, nor the individual that I mentioned to. But for several days, it was my impression that the procedures were executed correctly and that we struck a target that we thought was an enemy. There was a mistake made. It's a tragic mistake.
It's huge.
Of war.
And we lied to the American people for 5 days and all these families who
We were
thought.
lying, though, Congressman. Lying implies we were intentionally trying to deceive. That is not what, I know that's not what I was doing.
It's a pretty big mistake, sir. I yield the balance.
Gentleman yields. I ask unanimous consent to allow Representative Miller Meeks of Iowa to sit on the dais and participate in today's hearing without objection. So ordered. The chair now recognizes Mr. Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Milley, General McKenzie. Like my colleagues here, I want to thank you for your distinguished service to our nation. We're very grateful. I personally share your compassion and gratitude and extend my condolences to the Gold Star families here and all those who lost loved ones, the more than 2,400 who made the ultimate sacrifice over the nearly 20 years of action in Afghanistan, as well as the thousands wounded, both with injuries that are visible and those that are not. Paraphrasing some of the things that I've heard today, no single factor determined the outcome, is I think something you've said. 20 years of decisions, actions, successes, and failures all contributed to what ultimately happened in Afghanistan. You said there was a whole series of lessons along the way. And if I come to something, General Milley, I think if I got it right when you were talking with my colleague, Ranking Member Meeks, that the start of the end was the Doha Agreement in 2020. Is that fair?
I think that's a way that an historian could look at it. You could also start it in 2011 when there was a decision by the Obama administration to begin the drawdown. It's a 10-year process of drawdown. The end game itself, I would probably peg it at Doha because it's a continuum of unbroken cause and effects from that moment to the end.
I think that's fair. It's hard to put one point, but what were your thoughts at the time of the signing of the Doha Agreement in 2020?
Well, the military was not consulted on the Doha Agreement, nor would I necessarily expect to be, but that was a State Department operation that was done under Secretary of State Pompeo with Sal Khalilzade as the ambassador to do the negotiations. I was not consulted. It was an 18-month process, so it actually begins before I became the chairman. It begins under General Dunford. So that process goes on. I don't know what General Dunford knew, but I don't think he knew much about it. We knew there was a negotiation going on, the specifics of which we didn't know the terms of the negotiation. I found out about that from Secretary Esper after the fact, and then it was then, and then a week or two later, we were given the classified annex to the Doha Agreement. But no, we didn't participate in the development of the terms nor the negotiations.
And when the decision was made to draw down to 2,500 troops by, I think you said Inauguration Day, did you see that as something that was sustainable, get to the ultimate goal, or did that put U.S. forces at undue risk?
My assessment at the time was that 2,500 U.S. troops, and again, these are high-end Special Forces troops, 2,500 U.S. troops with the contractors, with NATO, was the min force necessary in order to buy the time to ensure the conditions were going to get met and result in a satisfactory negotiated settlement with the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban. Obviously, that didn't happen. But
at any time between the Doha Agreement and January of 21, when we were at 2,500, or even April and ongoing, was the government involved in the negotiations? Was there evidence of progress being made in the negotiations between the Taliban and the government that would give confidence that we could achieve the conditions that were laid out in the Doha Agreement?
I don't actually know that, I think that's probably a question for the State Department because they would probably have better visibility. I don't think, I'm almost positive that there were no substantive negotiations between the government of Afghanistan, the government of, President Ghani, and the Taliban. Now, there may have been some back-channel stuff. There might have been some stuff that I'm not aware of. But I am not aware of substantive negotiations between the government of Afghanistan. And in fact, the Doha Agreement, that's one of the requirements, one of the conditions is that one of the conditions is a reduction in violence for a specified period of time. I think it was 90 days, if I remember. And then that was supposed to lead to a permanent countrywide ceasefire. And then that would lead to a negotiated settlement between the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban. Obviously, the Taliban didn't adhere to those conditions. They blew through those, but that was part of the Doha Agreement. And that, I think, and I know you had Dr. Khalilzad here before, I think that's kind of what he was trying to make happen, but it never happened.
I understand I'm almost out of time, but the goal was to have that negotiated agreement. The Taliban quickly, I think, recognized that they didn't need to negotiate with the government. The government was weak, and they could achieve their goals by other means. At what point, if any, and this is to both of you, would you mark the tipping point where the outcome was all but certain? It was probably long before August of 2021, I imagine.
I would say 2 points. One is the Doha Agreement, because it was negotiated between the government of the United States and a State Department designated terrorist organization, the Taliban, and it was a bilateral agreement, that kind of pulled the rug out morale-wise from both the Afghan security forces and the government itself, because at that point they knew with certainty that there was a date certain now.
Right.
So I think that probably had a significant effect. Historians are going to have to figure out exactly what that effect is. The actual observable tipping point of the collapse of the Afghan military, et cetera, that clearly is in July. As you start looking at when provincial capitals start falling. The first provincial capital falls, I think it's 6 August, and then in the next 10 days, the rest of them start falling all the way to the capture of Kabul. But it's at the end of July, sort of right at the beginning of August, it becomes evident that the Afghan security forces are crumbling, and we are in it, and that's where the whole NEO thing comes up.
Thank
but
you.
that's about the timing.
All right, General
Gentleman's
McCullough, thank
time's
you for the extra time. I yield
expired.
back.
Chair recognizes Ms. Wagner.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses for their time and their service to our country, recognizing certainly our Gold Star families that have joined us and those that have not today. One of the 13 lost at Abbey Gate was from my community in Missouri, Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz. And I also want to remind our viewers and our colleagues here today that the title of this hearing, of this particular hearing, is an assessment of the Biden administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan by America's generals. Even today, 2.5 years after the Biden administration's botched withdrawal, after countless hearings, roundtables, and briefings, the incompetence that led to the abandonment of Afghanistan absolutely astounds me. The administration ignored the advice of allies, experts, and military leaders, blowing past warning sign after warning sign as it allowed Afghanistan to collapse. The total betrayal of our U.S. military servicemen and women, of our allies, of Afghanistan, and the subsequent chaotic, shameful withdrawal has seriously damaged our credibility as an ally and a leader. And because of the Biden administration's actions, American communities are less safe, and the world is much more dangerous and unstable. We are paying the price now, with conflicts roiling every corner of the globe. And yes, General Milley, those responsible must provide answers, as you've said over and over, but also they must be held to account. General Milley, General McKenzie, I ask the following questions not just as a member of Congress, but also as a mother of an Army Ranger who served under your command in combat in Afghanistan. So let me ask both of you, General Milley, General McKenzie, did you engage with our NATO allies and other allied nations about the withdrawal plan before President Biden announced his decision to go to zero in April 2021?
Absolutely, sure. That was fundamental. And then the NATO slogan at the time was in together, out together. So we coordinated multiple times with our NATO allies.
Did our allies with troops in Afghanistan recommend not going to zero prior to or after President Biden's April 2021 withdrawal announcement? John McKenzie?
Yes, they did. And it was my actual belief that had we stayed at 2,500, we would have had probably 5,000.
Yours and
NATO
everyone
forces.
else's.
Maybe more than that.
Including the Trump administration. Did our allies with troops in Afghanistan inform you that they would withdraw if the U.S. went to zero? General Milley?
Yes, they said, we'll be aligned with you, in together, out together, we'll be aligned with you, and that they would follow our lead.
General McKenzie?
Yes, because of the unique capabilities that the United States brings, they couldn't have stayed without our presence.
General Milley and General McKenzie, with the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan was nearly complete by mid-July, more than a month ahead of the August deadline. Why was the drawdown executed so quickly? And did you at any point believe the process was moving too fast?
I'll take that. So it was by design. From the very beginning, we wanted to get out as quickly as we could because we believe speed brought safety, and it would also give us a cushion in case unanticipated problems
And what
arose.
objectives, threat assessments, or orders were driving the speed?
Concerns about the Taliban attacking us, concerns about ISIS being able to carry out attacks, but also a desire to have room at the back end in case we had trouble, we had weather problems, we had aircraft problems that slowed us down in case that did not happen.
It's now clear, sir, that the Afghan military and some of our allies, for that matter, were not ready for how quickly the U.S. Withdrawal occurred. Did you ever consider or advise that the pace of the drawdown slowed to ensure the Afghan military was able to successfully transition? If so, why was such action not taken?
So the Afghan military was read in from the beginning about the pace of the withdrawal. And frankly, ma'am, I don't believe that waiting another 30 days would have had any material impact at all.
One quick other question, and I thank you so much. General Milley, General McKenzie, has the Taliban been carrying out a campaign of retribution, reprisals, and revenge killings against the Afghan allies that we left behind?
I believe yes.
Absolutely, systematically.
Systematically. I yield back.
General Milley yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Milley, General McKenzie, thank you for your sacrifices. To my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who have served in uniform, thank you for yours. To all of you in this room who might have served, I'm grateful. And particularly to the Gold Star families in the room. If you might just raise your hands, those of you here are representing loved ones. Okay. I'm one of you, and thank you for holding that up. I'm one of you, and I know how you feel. I've been looking for answers my whole life after having lost my father in Vietnam. You can imagine the questions I have to this very day. With the help of Chairman Milley's office and the chairman himself, I was able to go back to Vietnam for the first time in my life in March of last year. I went to the very dirt where my father took his last breath. And I can tell you from that experience, it is where I took my first. And when I came home, I recognized two things. First of all, one of the answers is this little piece of plastic. It's the voting card that we use in the House chamber in the Capitol. It's where we make decisions that can make life and also take life. It's true in the White House. It's true with our generals. It's true with our armed services. And the weight of that is something that changed me forever. But what I also recognized is how remarkable the hospitality of the Vietnamese were when I was there. The People's Army, our own people in Vietnam, how gracious, how hospitable, how kind, how caring, and how meaningful they saw my return. And my question to you, General, both generals, is this: what do we need to start doing today in Afghanistan to ensure that families here and families of the 2,400 others that lost their lives can one day return to Afghanistan and have that same blessing that I had to visit the dirt where my father was killed?
I'll be candid, Congressman. I don't think there's anything immediate. It will take years upon years upon years. In my view, this is a personal view, I believe the Taliban is still a terrorist organization. I still believe that they conduct incredible, horrific retribution inside their own country, and I would not recommend to any family member at this time to return. There is probably some diplomatic initiatives that could be done in the years ahead, but the Taliban...
And that's my question, sir, is my return was 54 years later.
Exactly.
What do we need to do now?
It'll be
10,
many
20, 30 years to plant the seeds so that people can return.
I've served several tours in Afghanistan, lost a lot of people, to include these 13, and I have a problem reconciling with the Taliban. My father had a problem reconciling with the Japanese. Wars are horrible, terrible things, and I'm carrying that with me, and I'll probably go to the grave with it. So I don't know how many years it's going to take, but it's going to take a long time.
I appreciate it. General McKenzie, any thoughts on what we need to do, this institution, members of Congress, the White House, what do we need to do now?
Well, I think,
Or 50 years from now, others can go back.
frankly, our principal concern with Afghanistan right now should be the fact that al-Qaeda and ISIS have the opportunity to gather strength in ungoverned spaces with clear desire to attack our homeland. So I think we should begin with concern about that. And
Let's talk about that. What should we be doing on that account? It's more difficult now than it was before, obviously. What should we be doing now?
So I think we need to continue to resource U.S. Central Command so they have the opportunity to do surveillance into Afghanistan. I'm out of that picture now. I don't know what they do, but I think we need to keep an eye on it. I think that's very important. In the long term, I believe it is decades away before there's going to be any rapprochement with Afghanistan, particularly given their unusually and specifically horrific treatment of women, children, human rights issues, and they seem to embrace that. I agree with the chairman that the Taliban is a terrorist organization. They themselves don't have a desire to attack us in our homeland, but they do harbor entities and organizations that do have a desire to do that. And I think right now it's hard for me to get beyond that relentless focus.
I understand, but I have about 50 seconds left. The U.S. has a history of making war, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. We also have a tradition of making peace, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But looking to success and prospectively, we've made a lot of our former enemies our dear friends and allies. Are there things that we should be thinking about right now as it relates to making former enemies our friends?
Well, in the case of Afghanistan, it's hard to find common ground with them
Understood.
right now.
And that seems to be the theme,
It is difficult for me to. I'm probably not the right person to ask. Right. You might ask someone from the Department of State to come in and talk to you more about that, or USAID, because there are some opportunities there.
I get it.
But from my perspective, I tend to focus on the security issues. Okay. And frankly, sir, the security issues are profound.
I get it. Well, gentlemen, thank you. And to the Gold Star families, rest assured my mission now is to ensure someday you can go back, because there's nothing more meaningful and powerful. God bless you all. Thank you. I yield back.